In the heart of the Minnesota wilderness, where winter's grip is unrelenting and survival is never guaranteed, a tiny bobcat cub lay trembling in the snow, alone, fragile, and barely clinging to life. Wildlife Officer Sarah Jenkins knew the odds were against the orphaned cub, but she refused to give up. Rescued from the freezing woods, little Linda was nursed back to health at the Northwoods Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. But as she grew stronger, something became clear. This bobcat couldn't be returned to the wild. She had imprinted on humans, and releasing her meant certain death. That's when fate intervened in the most unexpected way. Because deep in the heart of the Minnesota Zoo, Linda would find something far greater than just safety. She would find a companion, a friend unlike any she had ever known. And when a tiny, fearless domestic cat named Duya entered her world, everything changed. This is the remarkable story of an unbreakable bond, one that defied species, expectations, and even the laws of nature. Because sometimes, the most beautiful friendships are the ones no one ever sees coming.
The harsh winter winds howled through the bare branches of the Minnesota woodlands, carrying with them the last remnants of a particularly brutal February storm. Wildlife Officer Sarah Jenkins pulled her thick department-issued jacket tighter around her shoulders as she trudged through the knee-deep snow, responding to yet another call about distressed wildlife in the outskirts of Duluth. The past week had been especially challenging, with record-breaking low temperatures forcing many animals to venture closer to human settlements in search of food and shelter. "Roberts, do you copy?" Sarah spoke into her radio, her breath visible in the frigid air. "I'm about half a mile into Sector 7, following those tracks we spotted from the road." "Copy that, Jenkins." Her partner's voice crackled through the speaker. "Any signs of the mother?" Sarah's heart sank as she surveyed the area around her. The tracks she'd been following told a story she'd seen too many times before, the desperate journey of a mother bobcat, weakened by hunger and cold, trying to protect her young. But the irregular pattern of the prints and the occasional drops of blood in the snow suggested this story might not have a happy ending. "Negative on the mother," she replied, her trained eyes scanning the surrounding trees. "But these tracks are fresh, maybe from last night. I'm going to keep following them." The trail led her to a hollow beneath an old oak tree, partially sheltered by its massive roots. As she approached, a faint sound caught her attention, a weak, high-pitched mewing that could easily have been missed in the whistling wind. Sarah's heart began to race as she carefully knelt down to investigate. There, huddled in the deepest part of the hollow, was a tiny bobcat cub, no more than a few weeks old. Its spotted fur was dusted with snow, and its small body trembled violently against the cold. Around it, Sarah could see the unmistakable signs of a mother's last attempt to protect her young. Branches and leaves gathered to create a makeshift nest, and the fading warmth of a body that had recently departed. "Roberts, I've got a situation here," Sarah radioed, her voice tight with emotion. "I've found a cub, probably 3 to 4 weeks old. Mother's tracks lead away from the den, but..." She paused, knowing what the evidence before her meant. "I don't think she made it through the night." "What's the cub's condition?" Roberts asked, already knowing what would come next. Sarah carefully reached into the hollow, her gloved hands gentle as she assessed the tiny creature. The cub, too weak to resist, simply mewed pitifully. "Critical. Hypothermic. Probably hasn't eaten in at least a day. We need to get it to the wildlife center immediately. I'll alert Dr. Martinez. She's still at the center dealing with those injured deer from yesterday. Head back to the road. I'll meet you halfway." As Sarah carefully wrapped the cub in her spare thermal blanket, she couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and hope. The loss of the mother was a tragedy, another victim of the unforgiving winter, but there was still a chance to save her legacy. "It's okay, little one," she whispered, cradling the bundle close to her chest. "We're going to get you somewhere warm." The Northwoods Wildlife Rehabilitation Center was already bustling with activity when Sarah arrived. Dr. Elena Martinez, the center's lead veterinarian, was waiting at the entrance, her experienced hands ready to receive their newest patient. The small examination room quickly became a hub of focused energy as the team worked to save the young bobcat's life. Female, approximately 3 to 4 weeks old, Dr. Martinez dictated as she worked, her movements swift but gentle. Severe hypothermia, dehydration, and likely hypoglycemia. Start warming protocols immediately and prepare a formula suitable for carnivore cubs. Over the next several hours, the dedicated team fought to stabilize the tiny creature. Warm fluids were administered, her core temperature was carefully raised, and eventually, she accepted her first meal through a bottle, a special formula designed to mimic her mother's milk. As the cub's condition improved, Dr. Martinez began to see signs of the fighter within, a spark in those blue-gray eyes that spoke of a will to live. "She's going to make it," Dr. Martinez announced to Sarah, who had stayed well past her shift to monitor the cub's progress. "But she's going to need round-the-clock care for the next few weeks." Sarah nodded, relief washing over her. "Does she have a name yet?" Dr. Martinez smiled, watching as the cub suckled eagerly at her bottle, her tiny paws kneading the air in contentment. "Linda," she said softly. "It means beautiful in Spanish. And this little one is definitely a beauty." The weeks that followed were filled with both challenges and triumphs. Linda proved to be a survivor, growing stronger each day under the careful attention of the rehabilitation center's staff. However, as she developed, it became clear that her early trauma and hand-raising by humans would make her release back into the wild impossible. She had imprinted on her human caretakers, and while she maintained many of her wild instincts, she lacked the fear of humans that would be necessary for survival in the wilderness. "We need to start thinking about long-term placement," Dr. Martinez said during a staff meeting 3 months after Linda's rescue. "She's doing wonderfully, but she's not a candidate for release." The solution came from an unexpected source. The Minnesota Zoo had recently expanded their North American wildlife exhibit and was looking for ambassador animals, creatures that could help educate the public about local wildlife while receiving the specialized care they needed. When they heard about Linda's story, they immediately expressed interest. "It's perfect," Sarah said, watching Linda play with an enrichment toy in her enclosure at the rehabilitation center. "She'll have proper care, plenty of space, and she can help people understand why protecting our native wildlife is so important." The transition to the zoo was carefully planned and executed. Linda was introduced to her new home gradually, allowing her to become comfortable with the space before being put on display. Her enclosure was specially designed to mimic her natural habitat, complete with climbing structures, hiding spots, and various enrichment activities to keep her mentally and physically stimulated. But despite the excellent care and attention she received, there was something missing in Linda's life. The zoo staff noticed that while she was healthy and active, she seemed to lack the social interaction that, even as a solitary species, young cats needed for proper development. She would often watch the keepers with longing eyes when they left her enclosure, and her play sessions, while energetic, had a sort of desperate quality to them, as if she was trying to fill a void. It was Jessica Chin, one of the junior zookeepers, who first proposed the idea that would change Linda's life forever. The zoo had been discussing the possibility of starting an educational program about the evolutionary relationships between wild and domestic cats, and Jessica saw an opportunity to solve 2 problems at once. "What if we could find her a friend?" she suggested during a staff meeting. "Not another bobcat, but maybe a domestic cat? It could be perfect for the educational program, and it might give Linda the companionship she needs." The idea was met with initial skepticism. While there had been documented cases of friendships between different species of cats, Introducing a domestic cat to a bobcat required careful consideration. The size difference alone posed potential risks, and there was no guarantee the animals would bond. But Jessica was persistent, and after much discussion and planning, the zoo decided to give it a try. They reached out to local animal shelters, looking for a cat with the right temperament. One that was confident but not aggressive, playful but not overwhelming, and most importantly, comfortable around larger animals. They found their candidate at the Duluth Animal Shelter, a young calico cat named Dewey. She had been brought to the shelter as a kitten, part of a litter found in an abandoned warehouse. From the start, she had shown an unusual level of adaptability and confidence. The shelter staff noted that she was particularly good with other animals, including the resident therapy dogs that visited the shelter. "She's special," the shelter manager told Jessica when she came to evaluate Dewey. "Most cats would hide when the dogs come for visits, but not Dewey. She's curious about everything and everyone. She has this way of putting other animals at ease." The introduction process was planned with meticulous care. The first step was to let Linda and Dewey become aware of each other's presence without direct contact. Dewey was given a separate enclosure adjacent to Linda's, where they could see and smell each other through a protective barrier. The staff watched anxiously during those first few days, but their concerns began to fade as they observed the interactions between the two cats. Linda showed immediate interest in her smaller neighbor, spending hours watching Dewey with curious eyes. For her part, Dewey seemed completely unfazed by the presence of the larger predator, going about her business with characteristic confidence while occasionally approaching the barrier to investigate Linda. After 2 weeks of successful visual interactions, the next phase began. Under careful supervision, Dewey was allowed into a protected portion of Linda's enclosure. The barrier between them was now a reinforced mesh that would allow for closer interaction while still maintaining safety. What happened next amazed even the most experienced staff members. Instead of showing aggression or fear, Linda approached the mesh with gentle curiosity. Dewey, displaying her usual boldness, walked right up to the barrier and sat down, beginning to groom herself as if she was completely at home. Linda mimicked the behavior, settling down on her side of the mesh and starting her own grooming routine. "It's like they're having a conversation," Jessica observed, watching the two cats mirror each other's behaviors. "I've never seen anything quite like it." The breakthrough moment came during their 3rd week of mesh-separated interactions. Linda had been playing with one of her favorite toys, a large rubber ball, when it rolled near the mesh barrier. Without hesitation, Dewey batted at it through the mesh, sending it rolling back to Linda. To everyone's amazement, Linda gently batted it back, and soon the two were engaged in an impromptu game of catch. That game marked a turning point in their relationship, and after several more days of positive interactions, the decision was made to allow them to meet without barriers. The first direct introduction was planned for early morning, when both cats would be calm after their breakfast. The staff watched with bated breath as Dewey was allowed into Linda's enclosure. The size difference between them was striking. Linda, now fully grown, was more than 3 times Dewey's size. But any concerns about compatibility quickly melted away as the two cats approached each other. Their first physical interaction was almost ceremonial in its gentleness. Linda lowered her head to Dewey's level, and Dewey reached up to touch noses, a traditional feline greeting. Then, in a moment that would later become famous through a photographer's lucky snapshot, Dewey reached up and placed one tiny paw on Linda's nose, as if to say, "Yes, we're going to be friends." From that day forward, Linda and Dewey were inseparable. The zoo staff marveled at how their relationship evolved and deepened. Despite their size difference, they played together with remarkable gentleness. Linda seemed to instinctively understand her own strength, always moderating her movements when wrestling with her smaller friend. Dewey, for her part, showed no fear of her larger companion, often initiating play sessions and even using Linda as a climbing post. Their friendship soon became one of the zoo's main attractions. Visitors would gather around their enclosure, cameras ready, hoping to catch glimpses of their interactions. Children were particularly enchanted by the sight of tiny Duia curled up against Linda's side for afternoon naps, or the two of them playing chase around their enclosure. The educational value of their friendship proved to be even greater than initially hoped. The zoo developed a popular program called Cats of All Sizes, using Linda and Duia's relationship to teach visitors about feline evolution, behavior, and conservation. School groups were particularly enthralled by the unlikely pair, and their story helped spark numerous discussions about friendship, acceptance, and the importance of looking beyond surface differences. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of their relationship was how it changed both cats on a fundamental level. Linda, who had once seemed lonely despite all the enrichment activities provided, now showed a new level of confidence and contentment. Her interactions with the keepers became more relaxed, and she even began to show more interest in the educational programs, seemingly feeding off Duia's natural comfort around humans. Duia, already a confident cat, blossomed in her role as Linda's companion. She seemed to understand her importance in Linda's life and took her responsibilities as friend and playmate seriously. The keepers often observed her encouraging Linda to play when the bobcat seemed down, or providing comfortable companionship during thunderstorms when Linda would typically be anxious. Their story caught the attention of national media when a series of photographs showing their friendship went viral on social media. The images captured the essence of their remarkable bond. A tiny calico cat fearlessly playing with a full-grown bobcat, the two of them sharing meals, grooming each other, and sleeping curled up together despite their dramatic size difference. Dr. Martinez, who had saved Linda's life all those months ago, came to visit them at the zoo. When we found her, I never imagined she'd end up having such an impact, she said, watching Linda and Duia share a sunny spot in their enclosure. She's not just surviving anymore, she's thriving. And she's helping us teach people that friendship knows no bounds. Sarah Jenkins, the wildlife officer who had found Linda in that cold hollow, also became a regular visitor. Every time I see them together, I think about that day in the snow, she reflected. Linda lost her mother, but she found a different kind of family. Nature has a way of balancing things out, doesn't it? As the years passed, Linda and Duia's friendship only grew stronger. They developed their own unique routines and ways of communicating. In the mornings, they would greet each other with gentle head bumps before sharing breakfast. During the day, they would alternate between playing and finding sunny spots for joint napping sessions. In the evenings, they would often groom each other before settling down for the night. Duia usually curled up against Linda's side or stretched out across her back. Their story became a symbol of hope and possibility, inspiring countless visitors and even leading to several children's books about their friendship. The zoo received letters from around the country, many from children who had been moved by their story. Some wrote about how Linda and Duia had helped them understand that true friendship transcends differences, while others shared how the unlikely pair had inspired them to be more accepting of others who seemed different from them. One particularly touching moment came when a group of children from a local hospital's oncology ward visited the zoo. Many of these children were dealing with feelings of isolation and difference due to their illness. Watching Linda and Duia together, seeing how they had found strength and joy in their unlikely friendship, provided a powerful message of hope and acceptance. "Look at them," one young patient said, watching Duia playfully swat at Linda's tail while the larger cat pretended not to notice. "They don't care that they're different. They just care that they're friends." The success of Linda and Duia's relationship led to further research into interspecies friendships and their potential benefits in captive wildlife care. Their story demonstrated that with proper introduction and supervision, such relationships could provide valuable enrichment for animals that couldn't be released into the wild. As Linda and Duia's fame grew, The zoo made sure to maintain the integrity of their relationship and ensure their well-being remained the top priority. Their enclosure was upgraded to provide even more enrichment opportunities, and their daily routine was carefully protected despite their popularity. Today, visitors to the Minnesota Zoo can still find Linda and Dewey in their shared enclosure, their unlikely friendship as strong as ever. Linda, the rescued bobcat who once faced death in the winter cold, and Dewey, the confident calico who feared nothing, continue to demonstrate that the bonds of friendship can bridge any gap, even one between a wild bobcat and a domestic cat. Their story serves as a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful relationships come from the most unexpected places, and that love and friendship know no boundaries of size, species, or circumstance. In a world that often seems divided by differences, Linda and Dewey show us that what matters most is not how we look or where we come from, but the connections we make and the love we share. As the sun sets over the zoo each evening, Linda and Dewey can be found in their favorite spot, curled up together, two very different cats united by an extraordinary friendship. Their story continues to touch hearts and change minds, one visitor at a time, proving that sometimes the most powerful lessons about love and acceptance come from the most unexpected teachers.